It's not going live. Yes, it is. Hi, we are live. So, Richard, off we go. So,
Indeed.
that was a little bit of a moment
Yes,
where we almost
stressful
missed the start.
Yeah, senior moments and all that.
Yep.
But
Why don't
we're
you
here
carry
now,
on and
finally.
talk about
Yeah,
where we are and what we've got for today?
exactly. So today we have a pretty stacked program for you through the evening. We are going to be having, hopefully, we think, a live guest. Tabsep is due to clock in, and while we're waiting for that to happen, or perhaps later, we're going to have another comedy clip. We will also have a long clip with James Atkins, who is serial entrepreneur and startup specialist, where he talks about what he sees as the unsustainable truth. And then David and I will have a talk about the unsustainable truth and our lack of respect for limits, and how beneficial subtractive change could be to actually keeping us to a sustainable path forward. And that's what's been scheduled for tonight, but it can change, as we all know, with live guests and technology playing havoc. That could be subject to revision going over the evening.
And so it is, and here we are waiting for our guest to join us. I'm just going to try and see if I can chase him up somehow and make sure that he has the right links, of course. But if he doesn't, what I actually think would be quite interesting is to talk about the presentation that he had planned, because actually it is quite an interesting area where he talks about Pakistan and what we can do with Pakistan, what needs to be done. We had these horrendous flooding over last year that very much kind of decided on the picture of how Pakistan ends up looking like in that way, right? And and I think we really shouldn't underestimate the pain that people suffered, and of course what is remarkable is the energy with which they are actually progressing forward.
Very much so. It's hugely impressive. It's really a telltale sign of the resilience that people are showing in the face of really adverse events, and it's very inspiring to see what they are doing. Given that Tabs is not here, I think perhaps, as usual, should we go with the comedy clip before instead?
We can do.
Yeah, I think we do that just in case.
You think so?
Yeah, because they're not super long. So if anything materializes here, then we go back to Tabs after the comedy, I think.
Okay, well, here we are then. Our ever amazing show. Who tipped over the tipping point? And I have to say that this one is particularly brilliant. This one there. We may have to wait for a moment while this buffers a little bit, because this is a little bit large file, because the laughs are so funny.
But you're part of them. He's where the score stands at the moment.
Yes. Okay, I'm in the lead.
Yeah, I think you should definitely have the 20 extra just for the effort. We are in awe. We're bowing to
Well, I also had to buy a Coke just to get into the cafe, so now I feel like very unsustainable sitting here. Full of contradictions this morning.
No, I'm totally with you. And
that qualifies for an extra bonus, buying the Coke.
Yeah.
Qualifies for an extra bonus.
Absolutely.
That's a good one.
Not going to object to that one at all. So, rock, paper, scissors, huh?
Yep.
So, okay, Nico is going to do it. So he gets 20 points so that he doesn't need to cheat.
Now, I don't know. I can introduce this game again. I can hear what we do. We just answer questions.
Yeah.
I can't cheat my own.
For today.
So, I cannot cheat my own brain. That's impossible.
Yeah. So, Richard, do you want to start us off?
Should I start us off? I'm happy to start us off.
Yeah.
let me go into my drive to kick off with a product I came across actually. I mean, it's in many ways, it absolutely beggars belief, okay? But here it is. Let me do a screen share, present, share screen, boom. Can you see it?
Drum roll, but
Nope.
no. Oh, here we go, here we go.
Like beggars belief. Oh.
Oh!
Wow. Wow.
Oh
Right?
dear. Oh dear.
What every man should have with him when he goes on holiday.
When he takes his final holiday.
Yeah. And you know,
This is
women and
carbon
girls
capture.
too.
Is this does it capture the carbon and actually allow you to use that, you know, in blackening your steak? That's how you do the carbon capture.
well,
This is
you
a
know,
mixture.
This isn't real.
it is a real product. It can be ordered over the web.
Well, it'll keep the air clean, maybe, you know, kind of like those ppm whatever 2.5.
I mean, you have to give the guy, you know, some credit, because I'm being absolutely totally honest here. I seriously don't know the amount of money I would want it to get paid for featuring on that particular pack, and actually trying to look serious and kind of cheery. Look at my burger here, huh? And that, I think, is the maximum
one
effort.
thing that an electric vehicle cannot do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we have a big minus score in the column of electric vehicles, because you will not be able to fit your exhaust barbecue grill on there.
That is how many miles to cook one sausage is?
I haven't ordered it, but I'm quite keen to check in the instructions what the kind of data.
Wait, because
like.
I was thinking you did it like when you stopped, but maybe that's the innovation, that you can grill on the go and then your sausages are ready when you get there. That's just added to its score.
Yeah.
I mean,
fuel efficiency, you cook and move.
Yeah, I mean, that would be
this
an
is
added feature.
This is
Maybe
a mixture
the
of
deluxe
three.
version.
Yeah. This is a mixture of all the three things we don't need during the climate change. You got a car using the diesel or something. Then you go, what's that?
And meat.
The fryer?
And meat.
Yeah.
And the meat,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's meat.
Yeah, and I'm
All we
very,
need on this is a pet.
we need a dog or something. But now, for me, I won't go further. I'll say no, because, you know, we use wood in Africa, man. You know, I mean, I'm just going to talk about where I'm from. We don't have to drive 20 miles to cook one sausage. That's fair.
Would that be a good use of resources in Zimbabwe? 20 miles, one sausage, or anywhere for that matter.
First of all, Richard, we don't have petrol, we don't have diesel, we don't have anything, and the money is too big for this product. I'll say no.
Okay, you say no.
No, we don't need it.
I can imagine what my wife is going to say when I do this, and I'm telling her, you got to keep driving another 5 miles because the sausage isn't done yet.
This is a question.
You know, it's one of these male things. You know, it's one of these must-have gadgets for the man. It's like I can think of 3 people who've been struggling to think about what's a good Christmas present, and it solved it.
Yeah,
no, you really don't like these people, do you?
I know that I'm not married yet, but this is when your wife doesn't want to see you in the house. breakfast guy. breakfast guy. Where we go, mate? See you next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's like it's been constructed with the mindset to piss off as many people as is humanly possible, right? You're going to hit all the eco warriors here. They're going to have an absolute fit when they see this product, right? It combines all their worst nightmares. But you have the added bonus of also enabling you to piss off the neighbors. Imagine when your mates come over and you fire up the car in the drive and you let it run for 2 hours. Well, I do a few steaks here, guys. It's like, it would really get your neighbors riling as well. It's an added bonus, I think. I think this is a must-have product. I think it's the greatest Christmas gift you can put under the tree for 2023. It is absolutely so useless. It will live on for decades as a testament to the futility of sort of the human mind to actually develop.
This is a totally new meaning to the term petrolhead.
Yes.
Maybe a tool to get you a Darwin Award, this one.
Exactly. You're thinking here.
Oh man, this is
absolutely yes. For anyone who doesn't know about the Darwin Awards, it's the award for removing yourself from the gene pool for the betterment of the world.
Yeah, what I still can't get out of my head is kind of the content smile of the guy on the pack, right? Feeling good about life as I'm revving up my V8 to do a few sausages. The warriors. Here I am with my barbecue exhaust grill.
You know when you go and fill up your car, you get these reward points.
Yeah.
You can claim one of them with reward points. And
no, I was just imagining if they can do a mile edge as well. You know, when you're flying, they go those bonus. It depends how much you fly. They give you points because of mile edge. I'm just wondering how many miles for me to get free sausages from him.
Can you imagine sausages falling from the air as the planes are, cooking them?
No, for me, I think that's no for me, to be honest.
It's a no for you. It's a big thumbs up for me for one reason only, and you heard it. Katie, do you think it's
I'm torn on this one.
That is for my friends that I want to actually not see again.
Oh gosh. Yeah, this is a tricky one, isn't it? Because for a certain type of person, this is perfect. But I think probably we can live without it. It does raise the serious question, though, of the fact that the absolute disgust of doing your food on it, and yet we breathe the air that comes out of the back of these things without any compunction.
Oh yeah.
But probably not one I'll be giving to my kids for Christmas, though they do like sausages.
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's an honest product.
Yes.
And eat.
No, for me, Richard, that's one point.
In for a penny.
Sell the EV and buy a petrol car.
For me, one
Yeah,
point.
I have some concerns about diesel here. Let us be clear. I think it needs to be petrol because the smell of combustion on petrol is like really nice. You go to a Grand Prix, it's like, yeah, I like this. This is a good smell.
Yeah.
You stand next to London bus lane with the diesel engines. It's like, no, don't want to be there. But with petrol, yeah.
For me, I'm gonna add up my point. I'm gonna add up 1 point in my point. Okay, the reason why I say no for me because we have a petrol shortage in Zimbabwe, so I don't think it will be good for economic.
Okay, point taken. I'll give you that.
It'll be a very expensive way to cook a sausage. It's it's not exactly.
Again, in Africa, it's hot. We don't need that. It's too hot. You can cook sausages in 15 hours. Come on.
Yes. Yes, it's £1.59 a litre.
Yeah, and I'm thinking a bit like this as well, right? Run up till Christmas, you're stressed out, you don't quite know what to get people, for Christmas. You refill your car there in the petrol station. The barbecue exhaust grill is luring you into the aisle and saying, "This is my perfect last-minute present," because it shows I've really taken care and I'm very considerate in my choices. Because how can you come up with the idea of ever buying this? It takes my mind to a whole other separate universe. Who buys this stuff?
Can you imagine Santa and his elf looking at this, thinking, "How does it work? What do you do?"
I am baffled. I can honestly say there are not that many things that truly shock me, but when I came across this, I almost fell off the chair. It's a serious product, right? It's not one of these for joke products. It's out there. It can be ordered.
No, I can't believe that. I can't believe that. Surely there's a health warning: do not use in a garage.
Then you would immediately qualify for the Darwin Award. I use my barbecue exhaust grill indoors.
Oh gosh.
It's fireworks. It's fireworks. You can't play fireworks indoors.
Oh dear.
So,
this one,
judge, executioner, jury.
Do we do without it or not? Okay. Do we do
what are
without
the
it or
rewards
not?
here? You cannot live without this.
Miss, no. I wouldn't do that. It's unhealthy.
Never stop consuming.
I'm not sure you've got the evidence for that.
Well, I don't like this. I don't like the smell of the diesel and the smoke and everything. Before even I look at the meat as well. So yes, there's no evidence.
So woke.
Right? So
there, I agree with Casey. Like, for God's sake, you get petrol-infused aubergines out there with a nice rip across, so it actually looks like being on the barbecue. It is really the product for the guys and girls who have everything, because I bet you they don't have an exhaust barbecue grill.
Food on the go.
Yeah. A whole new meaning to food on the go. You cannot live without it. I'm being serious.
I think it's a no. It's a no. Only for the friends I don't want to see again. So.
Could it be sustainable? Could we scavenge and just chuck some roadkill on when we?
Good.
Does it have to be as bad as we're thinking?
I think it would work well in Australia. Lots of animals there as well.
Exactly, mushed squirrel, chuck it on,
Couple of cane
mix it
toads.
up with the aubergines, nice and flat. Why not?
Behind my house, there's hundreds of them. They jump around the window. Now I'm going to ask my neighbor start his car. Put the wheelbarrow and put some fire.
Exactly.
Yes.
So,
For me,
what's the scores on the door? We have lots of ground to make up on Katie. She got a massive head start, which she deserves, by the way. So,
which is only fair. It's only fair. I mean, you know, she has got the extra bonus for getting the Coke, which you can pour on this. Actually, you can use it to marinate your barbecue.
I think Richard is giving the scores to you.
So, Nico.
Is that me giving the scores as well? Should I give myself a score?
Yes, you should.
Yes, of course. That's why you got 20 points up front. That's your fun.
I can't do that. I'll let someone do that. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, this is difficult. But anyway, catch is on the top. Anyway,
you can give yourself a score too.
Okay. Don't worry, I'll give myself 50. I'm joking. I think because I keep all the scores up to 50. That's it. I can't go for up that. So divide 50. It depends. So I think she deserves 30.
Sorry?
30.
KT's 30.
Yeah.
Oh,
Then
wow. Great.
Richard, as a producer, and produced this very unique stuff. So
I think you should give him a negative score for bringing this up.
no, Richard's going up to 40, Mike. That was really good.
There you go.
I mean, you know, I'm traumatized by this.
No, me and David, we're going to share.
So there you have it. Technology once again becomes an issue. We're not entirely sure what happened to the sound there, but it seemed to go for a moment or two. And it means we might even replay this clip at a later date. So for the time being, we're going to take that off air. Now, we have had confirmation that Tapsif will not be with us tonight. And therefore, we are going to move on to the unsustainable truth quite early tonight and talk about it. And as you know, I have it here.
We can't see any of that.
Oh, always tricky. Always tricky to get right in terms of it's blurred. Let's forget that. However, the book David and I wrote touched upon many areas, but particularly the fact.
Anyway, I think you're stuttering.
Oh,
So you're a little bit lost in there. So anyway, so the point we want to talk about is limits.
Yeah.
And limits, are they good for you? Are they bad for you? What do you think? And now you're one who likes the fact that you want to drive as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Even in front of schools. And you think that, kiddies getting run over is not a problem. It's just them to look out. So no limits, right?
It's one viewpoint.
That's your viewpoint, isn't it?
No, it's not. But
what is your viewpoint then?
My viewpoint.
I thought you always said, you shouldn't have limits at all, basically,
No, I think while I have a big libertarian streak and I don't like interference in general, because I think interference often leads to a lot of unintended consequences that you only find out afterwards, and more often than not when it's too late. I'm actually in favor of limits. And I think a large part of my preference for limits comes from the career choice I made. If you don't have limits and you're managing risk, you are going to blow up the system. and that has severe consequences. The limits are good, but it's important that people understand why there are limits and that there is a broad-based, not necessarily consensus, but majority of why you have these limits in place. I think there are certainly perhaps people out there who don't like speed limits in front of schools, but I think they're a very, very tiny proportion. And therefore, speed limits work because people respect them and they don't want to break them. So in that case, limits actually do work.
Well, I think there are two types of limits. There are limits that you impose,
Yeah.
like a speed limit, whether that's in front of a school or otherwise. Yeah. And there are limits which are naturally fundamentally there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you when you talk about your investment background and so on, there's a fundamental limit in the sense that if you're given $100 to manage,
Yeah.
and you lose it all, then that's your limit.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's no point saying, "Ooh, can I have some more?" Because you've actually used everything that you have. Now, we have a tendency to think that there are no such limits, and we conflate that with the idea of limits like a speed limit in front of a school.
Correct.
So, the limits that... Sorry, I'm trying not to end up in a coughing fit. Why don't you...
Yeah, I think what you're trying to articulate, and the limits that are there naturally, you cannot really break because they are impossible to break. They are naturally set limits. And those get accepted because it's imposed actually by forces bigger than ourselves, i.e. nature.
Well, let's go back to the unsustainable truth then. And
Yeah.
the point of where our book kind of took the economic aspect was Malthus, Thomas Malthus, back in... that's the book.
Yeah.
And Malthus was back in the 1800s, right?
Oh, even late 1700s. So time of
The late 1700s.
time of French Revolution, basically. Napoleon, for those who have watched the film. That's the time of Malthus.
Right. And of course, he had this idea that there were fundamental limits in the way that we describe, in the sense that, the availability of food, you can only grow so much food. And when you run into the limit of that, of how much food you're growing, then your population can't increase anymore. And people ridicule that by saying, actually, you know what? We've got fantastic ways of increasing the yield of our crops and the ways we grow food. You had an interview previously with Christoph, and he talked about farming and the ability to regenerate farming today as a way of actually, again, thinking about how we can really get more yield, really. At the end of the day, your farmer is interested in that because he's going to grow more stuff out of it.
Yeah.
More stuff for less money, basically. And in that way, we had always said those sort of limits are old-fashioned to imagine that those sorts of limits exist at all. They are like speed limit in front of a school. We're just constraining our own minds towards it in that sense. So what do you think of that then?
Personally, I'm a very big fan of Malthus. He influenced me a lot as a young student. I think his thinking was actually surprisingly progressive. And the reason he got discarded, or attacked is probably a better word than discarded. He was attacked because he failed to account for technological evolution, mostly, but also other practices. He
didn't. He didn't at all. He said you go through bursts, and then there will be technological advances, which will then expand the limit. But until that point, those are the limits.
Exactly. And I think people misunderstood his point that if you cannot grow food, you are not going to be able to increase the population. That is a fact. If you cannot create nutrition, and that was his mind, the primary planetary limit was our ability to feed ourselves. And when he talks about these... first. Yeah.
Go ahead. I mean, I was going to say it's stronger than that, what he was saying. What he was saying, he wrote his thesis, his paper or book, in response to the prevalent view that was going around at that time that you could have a perfect circular economy.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you can't, because there are limits. And that was the point. And he took population and food as an example of how there was limits.
And I think that's actually very progressive.
Which today, the circular economy people would hate you.
Yeah, they might, but for the wrong reason, if that's the case.
What do you mean?
Because I think...
Are they right? Are they right? I mean, is this one of these things that you can be, is there right? Can we have a perfectly circular economy?
No.
Where we can have growth and continue on the path of growth? Do not need any more resources?
I don't think that world exists, because you always need some input at some point. I don't refute the circular economy argument that it's actually in many ways something we need to strive towards, but I don't see how it can play out in practice, because you are always going to need some fresh new input to be able to create new processes. And the planet can actually give you. I think the circular economy, where I have an objection to their arguments, is that they assume that there is no inherent growth in the planet. And there is. Our trees grow. Our livestock of animals grow. They become bigger as time goes on. You have inherent growth that I don't think the full circular economy argument is capturing in how they portray it. That does not mean that there are huge elements in circular economy thinking that we need to strive towards, because we will need to use less resources going forward. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt. We need to be better at actually using those resources we have available that the planet keeps on giving us.
Is that the issue? I mean, is it, we talked, just earlier in our comedy script, your wonderful exhaust barbecue, right? That takes up resources. Back in our book, we mentioned about how back in the 60s or 70s in the US at the time, they were marketing steak on a disposable frying pan.
Yeah.
You use the frying pan once and then you throw it away. So that steak was not marketed as food; it was marketed as convenience.
Yeah, it sits very uneasy
marketed
with me.
As the sense that you have power over your own time, you have control. That's what that was being marketed.
Yeah,
it was marketed to our emotions in that way. And now coming back down, when you take out at our world today, we had so many of these things that are being discussed around the world, and so many of these things that are kind of quite interesting in the attempts that people doing across all of them. Are they? I mean, how do they sit with you? I mean, what is the essence of what's being done in many of the aspects? The limits, right? Back to this idea of limits. What are our limits today? Well, are there any limits?
Oh, of course there are. We have a myriad of physical limits that the planet has given us. And
what
we
are
trying
they?
to,
what are they?
Well,
specifically,
the amount of fresh water we have available in our aquifers. Once those have dried up, we will not be able to grow crops on the scale we have today. And they're depleting at a very, very rapid rate.
What about the approach of desalination?
Absolutely, that can work, but it will only ever work on the margin, because desalination takes up huge amounts of energy.
But we have renewable
and that energy is going to
vast amounts of energy from the sun.
Absolutely, but it's still a cumbersome process to capture that. And a lot of the areas we grow food in are not exactly close to the oceans.
Yeah.
Then you would
But
need
we
to
can grow
transport.
food, we can grow plants out of hydroponics, and you can just grow from it by places where you have water. You just shift it in that way. You have these vertical farms and factory farms, and
Again, requires huge amount of resources and energy to build these. And those resources are becoming increasingly constrained.
well, what are they? Where are the limits? I mean, you're not really giving us a limit.
Well, the limit will come when we cannot grow our food, like Malte said. There are two areas in food production that is getting increasingly constrained. The first thing is that all anecdotal and empirical evidence suggests that despite all the technological advance we have had
So
over the
you
last
think
100 years, has led to a plateauing of crop yields. Okay.
so? Is the water the most stringent limit at the moment? Is this what you're saying, that the thing we all need to work on most is
No.
is water?
But water is an
But it's the
actual.
first one you bring up. So
Yes,
what
because
is
it's
the
actual.
limit that we need to deal with? What about the other limits then? They don't matter, right?
No,
You're not naming them. So what are they?
Topsoil depletion is a limit we have. When the topsoil is gone, crop yields are going to fall catastrophically.
Okay, so well, that's good to know. It's good to know, because I have a very different limit in mind as being the limit that we actually, the only limit at the moment. That's the prominent one. That's the capacity for our atmosphere to take on more greenhouse gases. And I think that drives your water, that drives your topsoil, that drives all those other things. And without looking at it, and then we might as well forget it.
Absolutely.
If you don't accept that, I think what your argument is exactly the same as what everyone else does, which is that there are other more important things, and so climate is always the second most important or third most important. We always put other things ahead of it because climate is subtle. But the other things, when you're without your water, you say water is most important. You do not see the driver for it as being.
I'm not saying it's the most important, but it's absolutely tangible.
Well, it's the same thing. I think it's the same thing in that this is the response everybody has. This is the reason why nobody genuinely considers about how we actively keep oil, gas, and coal in the ground. There's plenty of protests, plenty of kind of treaties to say we mustn't have more and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, the thing that takes our attention, that we go into first of all and says we must limit this, is things like topsoil, water, and plastics and all those things. We don't say let's just start by limiting the source of the plastic, the source of the landscape, the land change, the energy that we use to go along and chop down the forest, because they are chopped down by diesel in the chainsaws, right? And those sort of things. But we don't look at that. People do not look at that in that way. They look at that as being secondary. They see stopping the chainsaw rather than stopping the fuel that drives the chainsaw.
I think that's correct. And I think that's partly, an education, information issue.
No, I think it's more than that, because I think even you come instinctively, your first limit is not our climate. It's not the greenhouse gases. It's not the first limit. It's not that. It's not that. Your first limit was water, and then the next limit was topsoil. So your first limit is not the emissions. It's not the actual production of the oil and gas and coal. And this is not a criticism. This is a reflection. I'm saying that simply, that this is a reflection of how we are conditioned to think. How we are all conditioned to think. And that again is the essence of our book, The Unsustainable Truth, and what we talk about there.
Correct.
We grow up in a way as to think about, even when we talk about limits, we talk about the limits that we can do and change and so on. Because when you talk of water in that way, we think of desalination. When you think of topsoil being depleted, we think of other ways to grow crops instead. And that's what we do. That's how we end up with the lab-grown meat. That's how we end up with, plants that only grows in water with kind of artificial nutrients fed in there, and miss the connection of what actually makes this planet so rich as to be able to continue to evolve and support life in that way. Because we want to think of the limits in terms of the ones that we can actually surpass, that we can do something in that technology, going back to motors, right?
Yeah, I don't think you can surpass these limits. I really don't.
That's exactly what we do. That's exactly what's going on. You look up the number of inventions, innovations to create fresh water out of desalination. The number of regions in the world doing it. It's how we go about it. The efforts at cloud seeding, the efforts at creating artificial snow, and all of those things along there. The efforts at drilling boreholes, and all those aspects of it. And we do all those. And we do all those as our effort to surpass the limit and ignore the constraints of the limit, and say that the limits are there for us to become creative so that we can actually go over them.
Yes, I think that's largely correct. And I think all our efforts to create water, again, one of the examples of a limit, are proverbial drop in the ocean compared to what we picking up from the aquifers. When it comes to the climate, there isn't an exact limit that at 1.4 degrees we're all hunky-dory and at 1.5 we're dead. But the limit is there because it impairs our ability to keep our society functioning, our economy functioning like we have grown accustomed to do. And people struggle to understand the extension of those arguments at time, what it actually means if our climate on this planet gets permanently altered. And that is an absolute hard limit.
What does that mean? I mean, what is the limit? You haven't specified what you mean by the limit.
I'm not sure what the limit is, if it's 1.4, 1.5, 1.8, 2.
No, what do you mean by 1.4, 1.5? Those are, what actually are you talking about?
Those are degrees of warming of our planet.
So again, your limit is not the oil and gas and coal we use. It is some derivative of that. Again, you're putting the limit not in terms of the physical minerals that we're talking about. You actually, you again would prefer to think of the limit yourself in terms of a derivative of using those minerals rather than on the minerals themselves.
No.
But you haven't mentioned the minerals at all.
No, but we know what's causing the warming, right?
No, but if you don't dare say it, then nobody dares to address it. Correct. The thing about Malthus at the time is he dared to say, but none of us do. We don't dare to say, look at what's going on in COP. Yeah. And the difficulties with the face up, face down, face left, face right, whatever the face of whatever it is, right?
Facing out, facing down, facing. Yeah, I see what you mean. But
nobody dares to say it. But you don't dare to say it either, because you talk of the 1.5 and the 1.4, whatever it is, as they do.
Yeah.
But you don't dare to say limit oil and gas and coal.
Of course I do.
Well, you haven't.
No.
You haven't. I have said it. You haven't said it. Even now, you haven't said it.
No. But if we are going to prevent our planet from warming, we need to prevent our use of fossil fuel to the extent that we are doing today. We need to burn less oil, gas, and coal.
And how do you do that? And how is that a good, and again, is that just like the speed limit in front of a school? Are you just creating something artificially?
No, it cannot be an artificial limit. It needs to be a hard limit. So you have
no, but you are a person. You're creating this, right? Is this so? You know the essence between the speed limit in front of your school, of your child's school, and the limit in the amount of oil and gas and coal that we can continue to use. Are they the same sort of limits? People would argue with the one that we can always change from 20 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour to whatever it is, or we shouldn't have one at all. It is some sort of social convention. It's a limit out of social convention.
Yeah, that's a good description, actually. Or social acceptance.
So it's the limit of saying not burning oil and gas and coal, just simply another social convention. Is there a difference between them at all?
Of course, there's a difference, but they also share many similarities. And one of the similarities.
What's the difference between them?
Sorry?
What's the difference?
When
you say that there's, of course, there's a difference, and then you immediately say they share many similarities, then you're basically saying they're the same. You don't want to say they are different, so you go on to the similarities. And
well, there are similarities. We get to those socially accepted limits by some form of democratic process. If the majority of people oppose those limits, they wouldn't be there. But they are, which means that either explicitly or implicitly people are accepting and endorsing them. That's how you end up with speed limits in front of schools. And the minority opposing them is really a minority, because otherwise they would try to change them. When it comes to limiting our use of oil, gas, and coal, there is no difference, really, except for the fact that we have a democratic process in place by changing our local politicians or our government. If they dare to propose no speed limits on our roads, I think they would lose that election. When it comes to the production of oil, gas, and coal, there is no process in place.
I'm afraid I have to totally disagree with you.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. Completely disagree with you.
Okay.
The essence of what we face, the challenges we face with regards to the use of oil and gas and coal, is physical. It is the response of a physical system that has nothing to do with our social conventions. The rain that comes along falling, the patterns of the weather changes, and the the floods, the severe rain that hits India just now.
Yeah.
To give it with Chennai, that area in there, that has gone on there. The storms that blew in Russia just last week, and those have nothing to do with our social conventions.
No,
and
that's
the
a physical reality.
And the essence of that is that there are the limits which are to do with the responses of our physical system, independent of whether we want it to respond that way or not. We tend to believe that actually we can make it respond the way we want to. That's where you come in with your comments about social conventions and things. So we go along and we say, well, 1.5 degrees or 1.4 degrees or 2 degrees or whatever we set it. And somehow, by saying so, we're giving the message out to the world, to everybody, that actually this is where we define this is acceptable. This is where we define we're okay.
Yeah.
But the reality is, when your car's being washed away with you in it, you're not okay.
No.
And there is absolutely nothing you're going to do. You can do about it, and there's nothing you can go. You can't go and turn to someone and say, it's less than one. It's 1.5 degrees, 1.1 degree, 1.2 degrees at the moment. Surely I'm okay.
Correct.
We confuse the aspect between limits that we put on as conventions within how we want to operate between ourselves, and actual physical, genuine capacity of our planet to behave so that it continues to function that it does. And that confusion that you express lies as the root of how we do not actually consider actively taking those minerals away from being used from being exploited in the way that they are. Because we think it's our own social construct, as you've expressed.
Yeah.
They are two completely different limits.
Yes, but it will always be the social construct that actually makes the decision to limit it.
No, no, absolutely not. The whole point about physical limits has absolutely nothing to do with your social construct. You can carry on using it; it will just carry on making your life bad.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
absolutely.
And it doesn't care at all what you think.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we were to impose limits, then it would be in the context of a social construct.
No, absolutely not. Not at all, because at the end of the day, those limits will be imposed on you. Because you will find that your power plants will get blown away, your mining operations will cease, all of those things will cease.
Correct.
Your economy will collapse, and you'll find that actually you would have reached the capacity limit of the planet for accepting what we do. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with whether we want to impose a limit or not. And that point is totally missed. And it's taken to mean that actually it's our choice. It's not our choice. The truth is, it is not our choice.
No,
It
that
will
part
be
I think
taken away.
we can all agree on. Where I meant about the limit is if we decide to impose a limit
No,
on our use of fossil fuels.
I get what you're saying, but that's where the fallacy lies. That's where the essence what Malthus was saying. These things are not our choice. We run into them. And we have to recognize that we run into them. Instead, what you have are dialogue and conversations that go on about how we must somehow balance the one versus the other. We talk about the need for equity and justice.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when those limits, the genuine physical limits that are being breached, happens along, there will be no equity and justice.
No.
And
there we're in complete
we do not believe those things. But even in your mind, as you try to defend this thing about how is our social construct to set a limit, we don't have that. We either respond to the physical world that we live in, just like birds migrate south. Some birds migrate south when the winter comes.
Yeah.
Or wildebeest migrate along in that way. We either respond to the physical system or we don't. It's not up to us to choose and say, well, when it's like that, then we will be able to manage a little bit more and we don't have to choose that. That's when we go, or you can choose that. That's not the case. We are animals that live on this planet the same as other animals that live on this planet. They respond to the changes in the physical system, and as a result, they find new niches and new habitats for them to be in.
Correct.
But we like to choose to think of limits as something that we have that power to alter and change, including the physical limits.
Yeah, which is wrong, because that one is actually imposed by higher forces.
And so that's why in our conversation, we are all conditioned to think that it's up to us. And that's why even in our conversation, when I was asking the questions, you don't automatically think of those physical limits in that absolute way. Because I know you think the climate is a bigger problem than the water and all the rest of it, because actually the reason why the water is drying up is because the climate's going mad. And of course, it's to do with our use of land and land use change and the multifaceted issues of these problems, as many people point out. But those again is related to our availability of energy, that 80% of which comes from oil and gas and coal.
Correct.
So as we go along through, we always end up back at that point in that way.
Very much
but
so.
That's the point where we don't want to see as being a limit.
No.
We prefer to consider that as something that's a social construct. And when you hear all the arguments for saying why climate change is not real, those are essentially saying it's up to us to define what change is acceptable and what change is not.
Yeah, that's basically the root of that argument, is that this is an acceptable level of altered climate that doesn't bother me, for a short answer. Almost like you think of it as collateral damage in a war.
No, and
And that-
and I think carry on.
No. I think that is the argument of not so much the climate change deniers, but the people who downgrade the worries people like you and I have over the climate issues, are downgrading them on the basis that it's an acceptable level of climate change to preserve current economic model.
I'm not sure whether it's to preserve current economic model or not. I think this aspect of, to acceptable level of change and so on is it's not even seen as that. I think it's simply seen as change always goes and we always manage, and therefore we don't need to do anything more about it because we will always discover a way to deal with it. And
Yeah.
again, what that is doing is to say that we do not consider our physical system as being something that we actually rely on, and our world relies on a lot more. I think that when you go along to this, and you consider what happens with our thinking, with our choices, at the core of that is we're hugely conditioned
Yes.
to see limits as social constructs. We don't see limits as truths that tells us this is where we need to face our reality, this is where we need to move on. We don't see them as the monarch butterfly flying south in wherever period that is, over the thousands of miles from the extremes of California down to the forest in Mexico. We don't see that sort of response as the kind of things that we do. We always see everything as a social construct. So we separate ourselves from the physical world. We think of that as saying, even when you go along and you say, oh, I need to do regenerative agriculture and so on, you few people genuinely look onto that and say, I'm a person within this. Few people look to that, as I am just the same as an insect in this world. Nobody wants to think in that way.
No.
You don't want to think in that way.
No, of course not. It is the truth, but you don't want to think that way. Because it reduces the image of yourself as you have, that you're somehow special and different.
Right. And that's key, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where you go on, and that's where you end up saying, I can have my own construct about what a limit means. That's where the social construct of limits come in. Because a fish is not seen to have the capability of changing its environment to that extent, but we think we have. And we use it to that extent.
Yes. And most of the times we make it worse.
Well, I think probably in every one of the time, we make it worse. That doesn't mean we don't also make it better. I mean, you can actually do both.
Yes.
The comment about the medicines, right?
Yeah.
Medicines help us to change the environment we immediately are in. As in, if I get sick, I'm able to change that. But what was it? Over a quarter of our rivers?
Quarter of rivers in UK are toxic with levels of...
No, in the world. In the world. Are toxic. And this is not just the in cities and so on. These are everywhere in the world. Are toxic with everyday chemicals that we use. in
Yeah.
our drugs that we use to treat ourselves. And that's the reality of what we have. And I'm going to play my friend's comment again, reflections
Yeah.
from a few days ago.
I think that's a very good.
That was Koo talking about, kind of, I think it needs a few more minutes for it to get ready. But
Okay.
if we go back along and then you start thinking about what we're trying to do with this idea of creating a market to keep oil, gas, and coal in the ground,
Yeah.
we're not talking about what temperature or anything of the kind.
No.
We're talking about the ability to choose to think that actually maybe we just shouldn't use them in that way. We shouldn't be burning these oil and gas and coal in that way. And as an example, for example, out of 1 barrel of oil, the 42-gallon barrels that we make steel drums out of, right?
Yeah.
You make something like 29% of it is made. Sorry, you can make 29 t-shirts out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how many barrels do you use a day?
Sorry, you were glitching a bit there on the feed. How many
barrels do you use a day? Do we use a day?
We use about 101 million barrels of oil per day. 101.3 or something, I think, is the latest count, and it's forecast to go up to 102 next year.
So how many t-shirts, Sabi?
Well, 29 per barrel means we're making something like 3 billion t-shirts per day, right?
Yeah, you make 3 billion t-shirts.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
T-shirts.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the essence of this difficulty that we face. And that's the essence about thinking about whether there is a physical limit, whether the limits are real or whether they are constructs. And so here, because this is the picture of what we make out of the bottom of a barrel. The top part of a barrel makes you things you think, kind of engine oil, charcoal briquette, car can go 380 miles and bit of energy and so on. But out of that bottom, you can make 540 toothbrushes out of a barrel.
Yeah.
Again, over 100 million, that's 54 billion toothbrushes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in one day.
But first you'll have to unlock your device.
So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? In one day. And there are 8 billion people in the world. So everyone can have 7 toothbrushes.
Yeah, 7 toothbrushes per day.
But that's just out of one day.
Yeah.
Now, think about 4-inch rubber balls. 150, 13 and 14 billion, 13.5 billion of those we could be making.
Yeah.
And isn't that is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Well, I think it's a good thing insofar as, and this is, very much my bugbear, is that no policymakers anywhere actually dare telling people the truth that we need to use less energy.
It's not less energy. It's not just that. Because think about it, okay? Think about the point about limit.
Yeah.
Yeah? 39 polyester shirts, put 39 t-shirts that you can get out of.
Yeah.
Out of 1 barrel and 100 million barrels a day. That's basically 3.9 billion.
Yeah, 4 billion t-shirts.
T-shirts a day.
Mm-hmm.
You can be making 4 billion t-shirts a day. Where do you put them? Right? There are only 8 billion people. In 2 days, everyone's got a t-shirt.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, everyone's got how many? 7 t-shirts?
Yeah.
Where do you put them?
Yeah.
They're genuine physical limits, they're genuine limits of our planet all the things that we produce and make. And those are largely related to, in this case, certainly the oil and the gas and the coal. They're all kind of interchangeable in that way. We have
Absolutely.
brilliant chemistry. We can do that. You talked about how in the Second World War, they started creating that gasification of coal in order to create gas and gasoline out of it in that way. And we can do that, and we can actually go along and make all these other materials and all the rest of it, right?
Absolutely.
But those limits, but these limits are not social constructs. The social construct may say, 50 t-shirt is fine. We had the discussion about working a lifetime in a career in finance. What happens is you end up having enough ties so that you can have one a day, right?
Of course, it's necessary.
And so there you have those sort of things. It becomes necessary to have all those things. Those are the social constructs. But the limits that actually tells us the truth, takes us to the truth, are physical limits.
Yeah.
But we don't actually respond to them. We don't really think about that. The book, The Limit to Growth, the Club of Rome book back in the 1970s.
Yeah.
The essence of that was about the physical limits.
Yeah.
But we basically demonstrated over the subsequent 5 decades that they're largely irrelevant. In the same way as Malthus in 1700s talked about the physical limits.
Yeah.
And we again demonstrated that they were largely irrelevant. Because even though we may create unintended consequences and create harm, we look at it today and we say, by and large, everybody's a little bit better than all the rest. But the one limit that we are running into, this limit of our capacity of our planet to take in the greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide and methane and those gases, that comes largely from the continued use of oil, gas and coal.
Yeah.
And that is creating very rapid changes into our physical systems. And again, we tend to think they'll be okay.
Yeah, that's puzzling, isn't it? Why would you think that we are going to be okay when all the evidence around us is telling us that it's not?
Because we think of limits as social constructs. It's exactly what you gave at the beginning. Our instinctive understanding of limits is that they are social constructs. We no longer believe that there are physical limits. And what's really important about that is we do not believe the physical limits are actually good for us. We think social construct limits can be good. We abide by the rules of the land. We abide by the speed limit around the school.
Yeah.
We think that they form a social coherence.
Yes.
We're more willing to abide by that. So we abide by the COP negotiations and hope that they'll come to a good negotiation.
The climate's not going to negotiate with you.
Well, we place more value in what comes out of COP because we spend a lot of print time, a lot of print space, talking about how it's not doing enough and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But we don't actually do anything to keep the oil and gas and coal in the ground. We don't actually create a market so that we can actually keep oil and gas and coal in the ground. We can create a market in Bitcoin. We can create a market in, SPAC listings.
Yeah.
Back in when was it? The Dutch created a market in tulip bulbs.
Exactly. So why don't we create a market for keeping it in the ground?
Because that has to have us recognize that the physical limits is what matters. We believe limits need to be social, as you expressed.
Yeah.
The physical ones we tend to ignore because we tend to see those as being challenges to our creativity and innovation, for us to look to technology as providing answers. Same comment about Malthus and his thing.
Yeah.
Repudiation of Malthus about what he wrote comes from not actually reading what he wrote. What he wrote was technology will come and then take us beyond those limits. But while we're waiting for those technologies, those are very harsh and they apply, regardless of whatever, however you want your economy to be.
Yeah.
And so we come along, and we have gotten very used to thinking that whatever those limits, the right thing to do is to go straight through them, and yet each time we create more problems along. So the 9 planetary boundaries, you know, the way they look, right?
Yeah, there's like four have been acutely breached, right? So it's a very sobering read when you look at that, because all of a sudden when you look at the chart over all those 9 boundaries, there are things that aren't even discussed that looks the most critical.
Well, this one here, right over here, right? So 2009 when they first started, and you have this climate is here. 2015 climate is here in that way. And what you had on those other sides, let me try and see if I can magnify that up for you, right?
Yeah.
Are things like the biosphere integrity initially.
Yeah.
You know, and that basically means our animals and plants.
Yeah.
And whether they manage to survive that or not. Climate was in the red back in 2009, we knew that, and then the biogeothermal flow. But this not yet quantified is really interesting. Novel entities, and in 2015 that got darkened and recognized as not yet quantified. And if you go to 2023, what you now find is not yet, this is now the most extended. But what does novel entities mean? Novel entities are basically anything that was not there at the time of the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So what that is anything that we have added onto
forever chemicals.
Yes. No, not just forever chemicals, just all the things that we have added onto it.
Yeah.
Not just the forever chemicals into our space. And they have come from us working our way through the physical limits. Those things do not come from us trying to find a way around our social limits, or what I've forgotten what that word was that we had.
The social construct.
The social construct, you know, the limits which are our social construct, the speed limit around our school.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't create new materials in that way. Those other things come from our continual efforts to ignore the physical limits. And
That
they
is very
leave behind
sobering.
scars.
Yeah.
And they leave behind scars as they leave behind scars at the moment. And at the moment, what we're doing with our approach towards the climate situation, towards our use of oil and gas and coal, is we're growing the renewables. We talk about reducing the energy mix.
Yeah.
But what that does is to say, imagine I have a glass of orange juice, and I have a glass, and I want to reduce my use of, you know, the amount of orange juice I have with water on the other one. So if next I come along with 2 new glasses of orange juice and water, then I have 3 glasses in total, 2 of which are orange juice and 1 of which is water. So in starting from having 100% orange juice, I now have only 66% orange juice.
Yeah.
So my energy mix is better, but I've got more orange juice.
Yeah. It's a very good way of putting it.
So now I bring another 1 glass of orange juice and I bring in 2 glasses of water. So I now have 3 glasses of orange juice and 3 glasses of water.
So you're at 50%.
But I've got 3 glasses of orange juice when I started with 1.
Yeah.
So I've actually increased the amount of orange juice I've got.
Correct.
So we look to the limit of oil and gas and coal in terms of our energy mix. That's a social construct.
Yeah, because it makes us
The
feel good.
actual limit of oil and gas and coal is we've gone from 1 to 3.
Yeah.
So again, we are dominated in our thinking by the limits which are social constructs rather than the limits which are actual physical limits. We don't want to face the truth. It's time that we started migrating away from the oil and gas and coal.
Yeah.
Just like the swallow when it begins its journey back in the winter, back on south. It has to give up on its nest that it's built here.
Yeah.
And move on. Because it recognizes that there is a limit to how long it can stay here in this state, even though it has been very, very, very fruitful, very, very beneficial for it.
Yeah.
It has to move. But that's a physical limit that it's responding to.
Yeah, the
Not a
weather is
social one.
changing. The season is changing.
And so when we talk of limit, and again going back to the unsustainable truth, the essence of all of that is when we actually respond and accept the physical limits, we become more creative and innovative. We become better able to be the persons that we are. And that's a very different perspective to what limits are. But that doesn't arise out of social limits.
That rises out of necessity and the actual hard physical limits.
And where the phrase of necessity being the mother of all invention.
Exactly. Yeah.
It allows us sources, it allows us to see that with the limit, there are now new niches.
Yeah.
There are now new boundaries. At the boundaries, there are now new things that can be. But we don't want to look at that. We want to think about those as not limits at all, so we can go right past it with the same pattern of behavior as we had before.
Yeah. It is very sobering, isn't it, when you think of it that way?
But I find it most interesting is your response at the beginning too. Right. Because we are habituated to think of limits as social constructs.
Yes.
And that is our challenge with what we see in terms of our climate challenges.
Absolutely. And I think paradoxically, or not paradoxically, I think factually, a large part of that movement in people's mind has taken place quite recently, actually. And recently here, I'm talking about a couple of decades. And for me, one of the primary reasons people refuse to accept these kind of limits actually comes politically, where we can see that politicians do not accept any form of constraints, because you can always come and borrow more money and give more things to the electorate so I can win the election.
This is the sense that our sense of money, the freeing money from being tied to a kind of an actual physical standard, right? So we had that, we devalue it all the time. The Romans had been doing it. We continue to do that. We move on to a fractional reserve system where for every dollar that we say we have, we actually only need to have a fraction of that to back it up. And again, that's to change the construct of value. A money which was originally, or which in some sort of deeper sense had this aspect of it being a store of value, becomes converted.
Correct.
Because that value initially was, a farrier comes along and shoes your horse. And once
Yeah.
that has shoes in place, now it's created some value for it, because the horse can now walk along on harder ground for better and do work for you in that way.
Yeah.
And so you have an exchange of something, and that became money, because whilst I may be a brilliant cook and I can give the farrier a meal,
Yeah.
farrier would prefer something that other people can actually find and exchange with you, because you happen to be a brilliant advocate,
Hmm.
and they can obtain that in that way.
Yeah.
Now that's what's happened. That's what happened with this kind of aspect of money in that sense. And I think the point you were sort of seeing is that frees us, or it blinds us, or it liberates us, whichever you want to think of, from the actual physical limits. Because now when you have money, you think you can always go and find yourself a cook.
Yep.
You don't have to concern with actually, is there the vegetables? Are we having a drought today? That
Yep.
just means you just need more money.
Exactly.
Well, let me play my friend's conversation.
Indeed. We've
And
been
maybe
very
we can
heavy
talk a
here.
little bit about
And
that.
this is a
Well-
discussion with great perspective on things, I think.
I don't think this is any lighter, but it's certainly a different perspective. And I
Yes.
found it extremely helpful. Can you hear that?
No, I can't hear anything at the moment.
I think that's because I forgot to screen share it.
Ah. Technology again.
The bane of our existence. We love it, and we can't live without it.
I think fundamentally, if
Can
all
you
of
hear
us
that?
understand that we are part of a God or child of God, meaning that we are good and we love or light or peace itself. If we concentrate, if we want to be, if we make effort to become like God, the consequences are all good, meaning that we help each other, we will be connected to each other. We do not wish anything bad happen to us, to animal, to insect, anything on the planet. If we call it, it is a truth. If you do glimpse of this truth or try to find, what is the truth in our life, I think those people who are getting there understand, while all the others who are still understanding a material side of the world, it would be very difficult because.
So I just want to pause there and kind of, take it up in a little bit more in our conversation.
Yeah.
And it starts, I mean, people in the developed world largely have separated. You look at Macron, you look at when he lit that candelabra and landed himself in trouble.
Yeah.
With this idea of separation between religion and state and so on. And taking the what Ku talks about in terms of God outside of religion.
Yeah.
As that connection, that essence of creation, the essence of something which is outside of us. Whether there can be something that's outside of us. And I think that goes into that aspect of the truth as she speaks about it. And if we really want to understand about limit, we kind of have to have some perspective in that way. Because otherwise everything becomes just a material situation.
Yep.
And becomes, and because it's a material situation, and because we measure materials in terms of the money that we have,
yeah,
we
I think
relegate
that's a fair
it.
summary.
We relegate it into a social construct. We relegate it, as we have done in the situation of our climate conversations, of talking about the economic value of 1.5 degrees, the economic value of 2 degrees.
Yeah.
We do not talk about the physical transformation. If
No.
you were to ask, I mean, it's a similar situation, right? You go along and you say, a man is injured in a car accident and he has lost the use of his arm.
Yeah.
As a result, we measure that by the economic value of his arm's contribution to his livelihoods, and then there may be compensation that is paid. It's deemed that someone else was at fault causing it.
Yeah.
We do not measure what we do not look to what an arm's limitation is in that physical way.
No, not in terms of compensation.
Nor in any way, because at the end of the day, that's what it boils down on. That's where we have all these lawsuits.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
And
Not sure many people think of it that way, though.
Well, I think what Koo brings out when she talks about that those who look at, in essence, that word, the truth, the unsustainable truth. The truth there is not the truth of our physical construct. When we titled the book "The Unsustainable Truth," the truth there is something which is in essence in existence regardless of what our social construct might be. There is a capacity to the planet.
Yeah.
Those 29 billion, those 3 billion t-shirts that we can produce out of 1 day's worth of oil. There are only so many places we can throw them in on our planet. And when we do that over 365 days, that's 1.4 trillion t-shirts.
That's a lot.
And there is only so much space that we can actually put 1.4 trillion t-shirts.
Yeah.
That's the limit. We have the capacity, the capability. We have the capability to exceed all the capacities of our physical world.
And we are doing it repeatedly.
Because we view it with pride. Because we view it with pride. Because we do not see those limits as in any way connected with truths in the sense that I think Koo's talking about. Let's go on a little bit.
Yeah.
As you say, we in the past, we learned to solve, there's a problem, we solve this problem. But it's all connected. It's just one facade, the same issue has a different story or faces. So if we understand that, so, we all unselfishly love where we live, this planet, and all the human nature, and then we have different worlds, and obviously it's far from it, and it's very hard for it to get there, but I think fundamentally that's what it is. And I think some people start understanding that, and I think that's why people want to do something, environmental or whatever they do understand to make it better. therefore, I think, Cynthia's approach is good because she thinks that all of us who do understand, timeless space and connection with the universe or the God, whatever you call it, and then we work hard for it, for the not just the individual, but whole.
And here she talks of timeless space.
Yeah.
And again, we have this thing where we like to set a time to things. Look at the whole climate conversations, all about the urgency of time.
Yes. There's not many things
And
people agree on apart from time frames.
But in doing so, what you're actually saying is, I want to preserve the world I see, my lifestyle, the way I have. That's why I want to rush to do all these things.
Yes.
This is kind of the wildebeest going along and saying, we've got to change the world so that we don't have to go on this long journey, long migration. This is the swallow saying, you know what, we're going to have to change things around here. Let's get a heater into here so that we don't have to make that long flight.
Yeah.
And when you look at what's being proffered in that way with the massive renewable energy grids and all of those things and so on, largely it is to say we want to be able to have refrigerators and air conditioners.
Yeah.
And
It's
we're
a simplification, but it captures really the mindset.
And that is not what happens with animals over migration.
No, not at all.
They undergo massive changes as well as they go on through.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. We want to we want to turn that limit that is calling us, that truth that is calling us, into something that we convert and we control. That's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
I strongly believe that that's what we're doing, and
I don't think you're wrong.
And so we set this time scale to it. We will accept this time scale, and we see the world beyond this time scale as somehow being unimaginable in that way. And here, in some sense, is where all the people who say, well, climate change will adapt and will be okay, is in some sense not incorrect. We're not going to wake up in the morning of 1.5 degrees and saying, gosh, it's over. And I can't wake up. We are going to wake up in the morning of 1.5 degrees.
Of course we are.
And there's kind of this really interesting issue. Is it how will you feel? How do you think you will feel? How do you think people will feel the day when the newspaper says average global temperature is now beyond 1.5 degrees? It's like your 50th birthday, you know?
Yeah, you don't feel much different compared to when you were 49 and 364 days, you know.
But we've made such a big thing out of it. It's like going over your 21st birthday.
Yeah.
Certainly more in times past when you went over your 21st birthday. Lots of things changed. Your social construct changed.
Yeah.
You know, then in America you can drink.
Yeah.
Without having to have a fake ID.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There you have changes that are coincident with.
But you set up lots of expectations around that date, and so that date becomes particularly meaningful. And you set those up in a way as to liberate you as you go past that date.
Yeah.
But here what we have done is we have done the opposite. We have set up expectations that somehow are going to make us feel shackled. When we go past that point.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And it's very different.
And that's a social construct. That limit is a social construct.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
real physical limit of oil and gas and coal that we're using and burning is already present. As soon as we become aware of it, that's when we know the limit is there. So this time and space, I think, is really actually very interesting, because it says that if we really want to face the challenges and navigate through the challenges when the world is going on in that way, we need for our own self, our own sense of time and space, so that we can actually go forward.
Yeah.
People as a whole, I think we all raise our vibration. That will help everybody to be a lot more consciously well. And
That word vibration was used, I think Katie mentioned it in our comedy.
I believe so, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think so, yeah.
Which is an interesting thing, you know. Lots of people talk about that sort of vibration. That there is because linked with vibration is the sense of resonance.
Yeah.
Stefan with his music and that resonance there.
Yeah.
The way that we echo of each other, that we reflect of each other in a way, the way that our presence has an influence, and the world has an influence. And I think these things talk in a different language to this sense of connection. And that physical limit is an expression of that connection.
Yeah.
When you go on a hike and it's a long hike, you feel the physical limit. You feel your own physical limit.
Absolutely.
You feel the hardness of the ground. And that itself is a limit. You cannot put your foot through the ground.
No. You're being bound by nature.
But being bound by it is what allows you to go forward. Or you can go down if you want to, circumvent it.
Yeah.
Then you wouldn't go forward.
Yeah.
And then, we can do a lot of things. It falls in the right place, I believe. And I think this is happening now. I am not the expert, but I've been watching a different people talking about this evolution, conscious evolution, or genetic evolution, or astrological evolution of our humankind progress. It seems, we are a period of this era. Time is over and we're going down. And I think that's why we have all these conflicts and we had so many calamities. And we are heading a better place, that's for sure. And therefore, even more, we have to help everyone to feel, it is important now. We shift our mindset or shift our consciousness to understand better why we are here or what we are.
And that goes into the essence of our book, The Unsustainable Truth. The bit where we went to the brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
You know, what was
Grand,
that
Grand
phrase?
Inquisitor. And
The Grand Inquisitor, and what he was
And-
saying about the essence of
man
of
is
living.
living is that to have something to live for.
Yes. And that goes to this part. What are we living for? That was our original title.
Yeah. I still
In
like
that
the
way.
unsustainable truth better, but you know.
Of course. But it's asked again by Andrea when she talked about what do you really want?
Yep.
What is it that you really want? And when you ask that and you actually think about it and you actually want to answer that honestly, intently, it's rarely an extra coat or special suit or even the Lamborghini.
No.
Although if you give me the Lamborghini, I'll take it.
You'll take it. Yeah, fair enough.
Um,
Preferably in fly yellow. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what coup goes down to, and we in this cycle, and more and more people, in some sense, I don't know if it's true, but certainly compared to the growth in the the past few decades, we're being forced to ask that because we're sensing that physical limit. The limit people sense is a physical limit. The limits they think of are social constructs, and they want to turn that into social constructs. They want to turn that into things that by electing a different government, they can change.
Yeah.
Brexit.
They can negotiate them.
Look at the consequence of Brexit.
Yeah.
The fear of Brexit, the point of Brexit was this sense that we can't control, being part of Europe, we don't have our sovereign control over who comes into the country. Since Brexit, we have the pledge to go and send people to Rwanda, meeting challenges every day.
Yeah.
But the reality is people are coming in.
Yeah.
In that way.
People will keep coming in.
But we don't want to face that as a physical truth. We want to think of that as a social construct because we can then say we will pass a law against it.
Yeah.
It's like legislating pi.
Yeah. Good luck with that, by the way.
Well, that's what we do in one form or another, right?
Yeah.
We want to legislate climate change.
Yeah.
You know, I really realize London, not England, because I don't know rest of England very well, but at least London, we are so blessed that we had so many mass during the day, every day. And here, even Sunday, 3 minutes away from here, very historical church I have, and I sit there in the beginning when we moved here because there was nowhere to go. I haven't been to mass for nearly 2 years, and then I just wanted to. I went to the church and sat there and sometimes just meditate, or sometimes I pray. You know, lit the candles there, but it was not enough, and I wanted to learn meditation. So what I said, we are a child of God. We are pure, we are light, we love. Basically, you know, we should be confident, we should confident believing what we are, which is, or who are, pure love, lights, confidence.
So this is this part here where I'm going to move that on. It's largely described, and this is this part here where we see our challenges and we go forward, and we asking, as we did in the unsustainable truth, How do you reimagine your future?
Future.
And we had this thing about how the world compartmentalizes you between the executive of a company, the accountant, or the family person, the father, or the you know the uncle or the son or the husband or whatever it is that you have.
Yeah.
And we see them in these sort of compartmentalized frames. And where are we actually confident that we are a child of nature? That we are the same as an insect? We don't want to think we're the same as an insect. We want to think we're
No,
better than an insect.
absolutely not. Let me make that clear. No one I know would want to think of themselves that way, even though it's 100% true.
And there lies our inability to see the physical limits as physical limits.
Yeah.
And there lies our desire to see everything as social constructs.
Yeah, that I would agree with.
And when she talks of being pure in that way, this is not a purity or chastity of any kind like that, nor is it purity of goodness or anything of that kind. It's simply pure, as in we are a part of our creation, we're part of our planet. We are no more to blame than volcanoes erupting, to blame in that sense. But where we are to blame is how we want to see ourselves. Are we willing to have that personal responsibility of ourselves so that we are not imposters in our own skin?
Yeah.
And that goes down to choice. That goes down to the ability for us to choose, the ability for us to then go along and face forward of what we want to do. The ability, as so many people have said, where they can say, you know, we can just go and do this because it is for whatever the reason.
If
And
the reason
out of
is
the
good
people-
enough. Yeah.
And when Ian spoke about the essence of choice, if you externalize that choice, you make it into about the outcome and the impact you have. It becomes the speed limit in front of the school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
If you internalize that choice, it becomes, this is how I want to live with myself.
Yeah. This is what I want from life.
And when I go by the school and I'm driving my Lamborghini,
The fly yellow Lamborghini.
the fly yellow Lamborghini, this becomes a case of saying, what speed do I want?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to show this. I have to show this. This is important.
Oh, there it is. Oh, Diablo as well.
So what do you think of limit now?
I like limits.
What kind of limit?
I like absolute non-negotiable limit. When you start negotiating limits is when you, in pure trader terms, you're not prepared to accept stop loss. And that's always a bad road. So limits need to be hard. Once you have set the limit, you actually have total freedom within that limit, and you don't need to worry. That's why I like trading, and I like operating in that kind of framework. I don't want my boss to tell me, oh, I don't like that what you're doing. Yeah, but I'm inside my limit. So if I'm inside my limit, leave me alone, kind of let me do what I want to do. That's why you hired me in the first place, is to let me have my own responsibility, my own decision making. You have imposed a limit and I respect it. But I don't want to be bothered, 3 times a day with what you think or not think. So the limit frees you to do what you want.
Well, let's see with a different conversation. Let's listen to a conversation with James.
Yeah, it's quite a deep conversation at times and lighthearted at times. But he's a very thoughtful guy, someone we haven't had the pleasure to know for quite a while, and he's a very lateral thinker. He's a startup specialist, entrepreneur. He has lots of ideas. He's run lots of different companies, and he lives in Budapest.
Yes.
It's yeah, I people who are optimistic, we'll invent another kind of olive tree, or we'll find another kind of oil, or someone will genetically engineer an olive tree that can withstand this or that. That allows them, that faith in human progress and technology allows them not to worry about these things.
Yeah, it would be great to be bent like that and shaped like that. But I have phenomenal belief in human ability to overcome adversity. Like we will find ways to move forward. We always have. But you cannot take ourselves, to the brink. Then we don't.
Yeah.
And
but also there's a difference between an organized society surviving or dribs and drabs of tribal groups managing to get by for 25,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure people fully understand the difference between those two outcomes.
Right.
And the prescribers...
Maybe just a couple of bad elections which cause the difference.
Yeah, I think you come to the point there, elections will not really be top of the worry list, It's and it really scares me, the whole view on democracy in countries that historically are liberal, historically have a strong democratic foundation. It's really being, attacked at the edges.
Well, a bunch of people have said, 2 people have said to me in the last day, oh, democracy, I don't believe in democracy anymore.
Yeah.
One chap who's a former colleague and now is thinking of running as president of France.
Okay.
And another chap who keeps himself well out of the public eye. But he's also saying, it's not working.
Yeah, I think democracy has some serious issues at the moment, and some of them have been brought on by the democratic process itself, and that can be fixed. The other part I'm not sure can be fixed. And when I'm, in a bad mood, which happens kind of with a semi-regular frequency, I totally subscribe to their view, because I don't think the current democratic system actually works as it should do. So, however, I think we need to be kind of very, very careful what we wish for, in this situation. Because if you say you're not a believer in democracy, what is it you actually prefer as an outcome? And
Yeah.
that particular outlook, that scares the bejesus out of me when you start really thinking through. It's very easy to say, I don't think democracy works. And I don't think it works.
I think that's another one of these fallacies
Okay.
that you have to have an alternative first. And again, it goes down to this essence of what genuine truth and genuine limits are. The genuine truth is we have to stop burning the oil and gas and the coal. That's the action we need to take.
Yeah.
The alternatives and those other things, what other actions follow, they come from taking that action. But we don't do that. We set ourselves into a situation where we have to say, you have to give me an alternative first.
And then you postpone the whole process.
And then you postpone the whole process and you delay it. And you argue over how this cannot be the alternative and that cannot be it. You cannot tell when you are in the middle of a valley with monsters and dangerous animals and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
What's in over the ridge of the mountain that surrounds this valley.
But you want to get there.
You cannot say, I will only go out of this when I know for certain what's over the other side.
Mm-hmm.
What you need to decide is whether I need to move.
Yeah.
And face the uncertainty.
Yeah.
But we have this argument, we constantly say, where's the alternative? I do not know the alternative, but if you believe in the ingenuity of our creativeness, our inherent ability, the ingenuity, our ingenuity that you talk about, then we will discover some ways. We will find our path. And that's how necessity becomes the mother of invention in that way. Because necessity drives us to move, drives us on with the migration. And we have heard stories of this. We heard I was most taken by the comment from Aggie, the Girl Guide.
Yeah.
Who talked about sex for fish and sex for food amongst young girls in their community, and how but what drives them to tackle that is actually the consequence of the droughts. That drives them to face, we have to change the way we look at our livelihoods. And that opens those questions. It opens them up into communities to see how it can be. They don't know where it goes.
No.
And so many of the stories we heard are from people where they say, we started on this and then this then took us to that. But as a whole society, we don't want to make that move. We want to say, where's the alternative first? And as politicians, of course, we don't want to say that because we get voted out with a vote of no confidence. People tell us you have no plan. But here lies again another essence of the difference between the limits we are experiencing, the world we're experiencing, and that of the past. And we talk about it in our book, Again, the Unsustainable Truth. The world is changing. We cannot say we are at our capacity of many, many things in that way.
Yeah.
We cannot say tomorrow will be the same as yesterday. In fact, all indications is tomorrow will be very different from yesterday and will be worse than yesterday.
Yeah.
And in such a world, to say what's the alternative before we act, it's not necessarily the wise thing to do. because that leaves you stuck in that place until you can no longer move.
Yeah.
That's really
The
interesting.
way it should. But
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the factors which we assume here is the size of countries. So, I mean, there's a few things. Whether or not democracy works or dictatorship works does depend to some extent on the quality of the individuals involved.
yeah.
So you could have, I don't know of many examples, but you could have a moderately benign dictatorship, which isn't complete failure. I don't know if Bhutan is like that or not, but
I suspect it is in a funny way, right? Because it's not open to public elections the way we tend to think of it. So there is some form of hereditary process going on there.
And so, then there's, so one thing is you've got to factor in the quality of the individuals involved.
Yeah.
You've got to factor in the size of the population, because if you have a small, like a very small country, I guess democracy might be easier to manage in Liechtenstein than in the United States. Just like mathematically.
Yeah, absolutely.
There must be more variety and therefore less probability of agreement and more probability of kind of tribalism and stalemate.
Yeah.
You've got big population. But saying that, we've got a flat in a house where there's 3 families live.
I see where you're going with this one.
That's Hungarians for you.
Yeah, well. Yeah.
So
no,
I think we shouldn't really generalize about democracy or not, because I'd like to talk about much smaller countries.
Yeah, a more localized form of democracy in a sense. I think that is definitely, for me, something that could save the outlook of democracy, because I think one of the biggest issues is that the attachment between rulers and population has become very, very large, and they're seen as far away, living in their own, specially made up world, and there is no real contact between them and the electorate anymore.
Totally. I mean, I think China would be very upset at my plans for 1,000 countries with 1.5 million people in.
Yeah.
But,
and it would be a much better World Cup,
Yeah. You could have a World Cup that was fairly regional.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need all the traveling.
Exactly. No, I think that works, because also on a purely historical, geographical, cultural basis, we have loads of borders today that actually don't make any sense. I mean, they were literally invented, let alone the whole straight lines through Africa when, the French and the British sat down and decided what to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, it beggars belief, some of those arbitrarily chosen borders. But also when you look, into much smaller areas, I mean, the Italian regional differences are huge, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like there's 2 different languages, and in some countries, obviously, you have different languages. Belgium comes to mind immediately, having lived there. They're, the Wallons and the Flemish don't really get along that way well, because they're 2 different countries.
Yeah, and even within a city like Siena, you've got
factions. So I really agree with that. I think if you shorten the geographical distance and you kind of almost impair the projected power that the president of the US has compared to being the governor of District of Columbia would have. You
Yeah.
definitely shorten and narrow the alienation of the voter who feels like, who is
I mean,
this
it
guy?
may
Who
be
is this
that you
girl?
get more wars. I don't know.
I haven't thought far enough about it.
I mean, it's
But
quite unlikely to happen by design. It may happen by default, because if David's predictions of and all your predictions of collapse come to fruition, then we won't be able to sustain big countries.
No, it will almost, you will end up there even without the formal judicial process.
Yeah.
There will be, for a better world, there will be localized militias running the show.
Yeah.
And with all what that entails. But there are some examples that we've actually managed to go towards a more decentralized world. Czech Republic and Slovakia broke up, and it
Yeah.
was very friendly.
Yeah.
It was just, it doesn't make sense, and still they do lots of stuff together, which is
Yeah.
kind of collaboration, not integration.
That's right. Well,
I think here what you end up with is this difference, right? There's this sense here, and this is the challenge. This is the fundamental challenge. This is what Ku talks about in her ways, and coming together with the essence of the truth, which is that the physical limit, and the conversation here. The conversation here is about nations.
Yeah.
But what we are being asked to face is not what the conversation here is. And again, this is how pervasive the social construct of limits comes in. Because the oil and gas and coal that is burnt, that is running into the limit, physical limit of our planet, is global.
Correct.
What we are called to, and the resonance that Ku talks about, and that many people have expressed in that way, is a global resonance. And that's what it's for you is picking up, is a global resonance.
Yeah, I would very much agree to that.
And it's a resonance too going beyond the nation states, going beyond the political powers, but not in a way of giving up on democracy, but of seeking a new expression of democracy, because that is what the conversations have been about.
Yes.
From the blockchain, from the trust conversations.
Yeah.
From the conversations about the vested interests and the way the money hand through this large infrastructures has been caught.
Yeah.
And what I see actually interestingly coming out along this, and whether we break down, the economy breaks down ahead or whatever as we go on through, and probably happening in synchrony. And this is the challenge that we face. Do we actually manage to come together in time? And that's where this aspect of creating a market to keep oil, gas, and coal in the ground comes forward. Because without such a market, the fragmentation you're describing becomes almost inevitable.
Yeah. And it's going to accelerate.
Look at Venezuela this week with Guyana.
Yeah.
And claiming what is essentially 2/3 of the area of Guyana because it has oil and gas.
Yeah.
And Brazil is involved. And Brazil is involved because Venezuela cannot cross into those regions of Guyana, even though they have a land border over the whole length of the whole thing, because it's impenetrable. And the penetrable bit of it is through Brazil.
Yeah.
And so here you see the fragmentation that continued use of oil and gas and coal is leading to. And the discussions, the latest discussions coming out of the, the conference of the party meeting in Dubai. Again, they are the fragmentation, the continued use of oil and gas and coal is producing, as opposed to an acceptance of the limit. And that limit is not 1.5 degrees. It is simply the limit that says we cannot keep using it even now. And the thing that can bring people back together along that is that ability, it's that the existence of a market where we can keep it in the ground.
It does require a market for us to have,
because then we can all be a part of it without waiting for the interminable discussions. Colombia signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. At the same time, they're trying to extend the life of the existing oil and gas fields.
Yeah.
They're trying to do it without issuing new licenses. And this is a left-wing government that came into place early in the year. Now, will they stay in power? What happens to the next one?
Yeah.
So
remains to be seen.
And if they then pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, does that actually make the Non-Proliferation Treaty, does that destroy it?
That remains to be seen. I think that's certainly a possibility, because it's not supposed to happen. And if it does happen, then you question the whole essence of it.
So the political fragmentation is kind of the situation where you view those limits, where you don't actually want to accept those limits.
I mean, there's still tension in the Balkans, but Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, doing all right?
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly better off now than when you were before, which, if you look through sort of modern history, it was really only created because you had a leader of Tito's caliber and gravitas and charisma. Apart from that, Yugoslavia was a mess through that whole period.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of works, or has the potential to work without military conflict and bloodshed.
Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia as 3 doing okay countries. I mean, aside from the Russia proximity, they're doing all right, aren't they?
They are, absolutely. And I think, it would kind of make sense for the Belgians to split. It probably would make sense for the Swiss to split according to language.
Because it's not small enough as a country yet.
And then the issue becomes when you are going to create new countries from within existing structures. So should you have a Basque country? Should you have a Sud Tyrolean country? Because it's German speaking, less so than when I was growing up, but northern Italy is still German speaking predominantly.
Or Piedmont.
Yeah, they're close to the French, and the Italian they speak there is quite French. But I've never sensed that they have the secession wish that the Sud Tyrols have. And they're very clear, they don't want to be Austrians, which is like the obvious thing. No. We are Sud Tyroleans with our culture, our heritage, and we're not Austrians.
Yeah.
And you have a few places like that around Europe where there's a very, very strong regional sense. But they don't actually want to be associated with what would seem culturally their most affiliated neighbor, because they are still separate and they feel separate.
Yeah. But I mean, I think this isn't where the climate debate is going, really, is it?
No, it's going the other way. We need pan-global solutions. We need
Yeah, and lots of technology, and
Yeah.
and it's almost becoming like there's the people against, there's the right that makes a mockery of people worrying about climate change, and then the most forceful voice on the other side is, the techno optimists who think that we can surf the problems and
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, you and I'd love to have that faith in our ability to technologically overcome adversity, and I hope we do. You know,
It's
all of me
very
hope so.
anthropocentric, though, Richard. Generally, they forget about the other several million species there are out there,
Yeah,
and I think that's a bit of a problem too.
I think the problem is not. It's just not that. The problem is simpler that we have no sense. When you are at a limit, you cannot do everything.
no, it becomes a question of priorities.
When you have only £10 in your pocket, you cannot have the burger and the Thai noodles and the Japanese sushi. You cannot have them all.
No,
But our technological approaches is saying we should have them all. That is the issue with our technological approach. It is not prioritizing any of them.
no. Only by imposing limits are you forced to make those choices.
But the technological part is fundamentally trying to put those limits as to say they are not real. They are our social constructs.
We can negotiate them away.
And we can continue on and take this further, and we do not need to deal with them in this way. And therefore, you end up in this situation where we can have as many of these technological approaches concurrently happening and feel that actually they are all taking us forward. But that is the case. That is how it has worked when there have been plentiful resources.
Yes,
And today,
that's no longer the case.
well, we don't want to accept it. Again, remember the poll we had.
Yeah,
If you produce an extra unit of clean, nice energy, should you take away a unit of that horrible, nasty stuff? And of the choices, the fact that people felt we should increase both says we don't think that is a limit.
no. And the bugbear I have with policymakers and politicians is this refusal to actually tell people the truth. As a politician, there is a limit to how much money I can spend. We need to prioritize. You cannot have it all. What is it that matters most to the population? Those are the questions that should be asked and answered in the debate by politicians instead of saying we can have it all.
And again, I disagree with you.
Really?
Yeah. And I go to the comment made by Elinor Ostrom in her Nobel, speech.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see if I can find it. And the essence, what she says is that the essence of the policies, I don't know whether this has it, is we need policies to allow people to make choices, to make the better choices.
Sure.
Whereas the way you express it is we need policies to make sure people can only make the good choices.
No, that's not what I'm arguing for. I'm arguing for a politician saying you can have A or you can have B. That's your choice, but you cannot have both because I'm not going to print that much more money. So I let you have both. It's your choice, but you cannot have it all.
But then that comes to the problem of the whole electoral process.
Absolutely. And
Because
hence,
we are choosing them to say we want you to make it so that it is A or B in that way, and it's not actually allowing the individuals to their choice. It's not empowering the individuals. It's not empowering those who are closest to their own lives to make the choice that's the right one for their own lives.
no. And that's why I think the discussion with James about more localized democracy has a lot of merit. You have this problem with democracy and you have this problem with politics because people don't feel like they're part of it because they're being told what to do.
I'm not sure that's it. I mean, I'm not sure it's because they're being told what to do is the problem. I think it's because they don't have they don't feel what they want. It's because there's always something that they don't like.
Yeah.
Right.
So you
And
object.
we've gotten into a world where we don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like the fact that there's always something we don't like.
Yeah.
And we back off it because we each have lost the agree to disagree, lost the recognition that we are all together in this one planet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that fragmentation of politics that you and James just talked about, and the comment I made about the fact that actually is the opposite that people are crying for. They're crying for that sense of belonging to the whole. That's what Ku talks about.
Yeah.
That's that resonance.
Yeah.
And that's different from the socialized construct of the politics that you and James are talking about.
Yes. But doesn't that kind of path enable you to be part of the whole on your terms because you have localized democracy?
No, because the whole at the moment is the problem of oil and gas and coal. And the localized democracies do not address that. The problem of oil and gas and coal is a global problem.
Yeah.
It needs a global solution. It needs a global choice, the ability for individual to make a local choice that has global implications.
Yeah.
And the localized politics in the way you describe, where Switzerland splits into its 3 cantons and Belgium splits into all its regions, do not do that.
But you get closer to the people.
No, again, it's a fallacy. Again, it's one of these sort of mirages where you try to say that it's like Lambeth, London Borough of Lambeth being a nuclear-free zone. It's like, yeah, right, great, sure, We pretend that if we sign this treaty, then the space above us will the effects of the climate will stop there, kind of thing. It doesn't. It carries on through.
That's a physical reality.
That's again another one of these genuine physical limits.
Yeah.
One of these physical truths in that way. And therefore what it calls on is a global solution, is a global recognition, is that need for a single action you can take that does have that global impact. The part when we talked about right at the beginning of transformation ownership.
Yeah.
Of being able to be the ones that looks after the big picture.
Yeah.
But it has to be through that individual action along the way. And that's what having a market to keep oil, gas, and coal in the ground does.
Yeah, it's not going to happen without the market.
I don't think it will. I think that, but that's also a very difficult story to sell.
People are normally keen to open up new markets. There's always someone prepared to, come in and create new markets for new instruments to be traded, for new products to be traded. It's normally open arms, welcome that.
Well, to an extent, but here what are you doing is you need someone willing to step up with the initial commitment of capital, right? Someone needs to do that. Take Bitcoin. Someone needed to have mined the Bitcoins before the exchanges could exist.
Correct.
The people who mined the Bitcoins did it in the first part, by using their computers. And then what happened is that these huge arrays, and they started stealing the energy, the electricity.
Yeah.
To do it.
Yeah.
Here, you're talking about being willing to go up there and obtain in one form or another the rights to the minerals of oil and gas and coal. That's some serious money you need to put up.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, right? A
No.
few billion, maybe $1 trillion or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to do that. But to put that much money up front, it's not like putting £50,000 and buying a gaming machine and array of gaming machines and going off running.
I thought you were going back to the Lambo. They're a bit more expensive than that.
Yeah.
But
Lambo is fine. You can buy one of those, or you can buy 10 of this.
Yeah.
Because the market already exists.
Yes.
And here you need to get the investor along who's going to do that. And then the first pass is, okay, I can do that, and I can do it for the carbon credits that I can generate from it. So I buy these things, I turn them into carbon credits. But those, if you do that on a large scale, runs into lots of problems, because regulators will now say, no, you're actually holding off on our overall energy use. Governments will step in and say, no, we don't want to do that.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because it's off current production. Any row, just think about it. Any row where you take off current production of energy is going to run into your governments. So what you got to do is you got to tie it to the renewable energy that's being created. So that for 100 gigawatt of renewable energy created, you're going to take out, 50 or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever number we can agree on.
If when you get big, when you're small, then sure, who cares?
Yeah,
kind of thing, right? When we use 400, 500 exajoules of energy.
Yeah.
Right. 80% of that is oil, gas, and coal. So that's called 300, 400 exajoules, whatever the number, 500, I think.
It's 560, I think, in total.
No, we used 592 back in 2021 in total. So 400 exajoules is oil, gas, and coal. When you're talking about taking out 390 exajoules of energy over the next week, regulators will step in.
Yeah, that they will do.
Yeah.
If you shock the system, they will step in. But
and they will prevent you from doing that.
Yeah, but if you squeeze it, I don't think they will.
So for you to be able to really have this take off, you have to have the capacity to do that. And you have to have the capacity to do that without it coming on through in that way. Because you do need to bend that emission curve in that way. So what you have to do is when you say we triple our renewables, right? Then you need to be saying, actually, we're going to take all of that out, or 80% of that out, or 70% of that out, or 60%.
Whatever the number is, it needs to be meaningful for us to bend the emission curve, but we can
that
have
doesn't bend it
around that.
But that doesn't bend it. To bend it, you need to go even further than that.
Yeah.
And so you need some other market that goes beyond it. So you basically, the investor comes in, they make money from this chunk which they can get, and you can see how much there is, right?
Yeah.
So there is this part to say the first guy who gets in can take all of that. The next guy who gets in has a worse return.
Yeah.
And the guy after that has even worse return. Now you got a problem. This is not a scheme that you can continue on.
No, it's again a question of capacity.
And you've hit that. So you've got to
Yeah.
create that capacity. And that's where you squeeze from the back from the reserves. And from that side, what happens is you can tie it up in a way that says, just simply market it, right?
Yeah.
And that's one part that may run into some issues because people don't like the idea of someone else making money out of, keeping all gas and coal in the ground.
Tough luck. How else are you going to slow it down?
Well, that's not enough of a answer. You need to think, how are you going to make this palatable? How are you going to make this possible? It's no point saying, tough luck, whatever it is, because if you can't think of a way to make this like the thing to do, then your cynicism is just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. There is literally no room here for a kind of, well, if you don't do it, it's just stupid. And so what you do is you offer them, so you have graded returns, right? You have a whole scheme with different level of returns. You got returns that comes from the carbon credits, and those trade at $40 or $50 or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
You got returns that comes out of cutting down the reserves, and there what happens is you've got the situation where you have a different business. I'm an investor. I need to set up a different business. I need to set up a brokerage business. I need to set up a capital introduction business.
Yeah.
I now need to stand in as a cap intro person, where I introduce people to regenerative agricultural investments. Invest in Christoph and those sort of things, or whatever it is. And I do it by attracting the people to say part of your money also goes into keeping it in the ground. So you get some benefit out of it. And if you can get the investors interested in buying the mineral rights of oil and gas and coal, you there?
Yeah.
To be satisfied with what the official creditors may give them, and that they may be able to take a lesser level of the others. Yeah.
Okay. I don't see why they would want to take a lesser level, but okay, go on.
Oh, why not? I mean, you've already made your, 5%, 10%, or whatever return it is.
Yeah.
Out of that chunk. So, you can demand more of it out of it, in which case you price that market out and that market doesn't exist.
You kill the golden goose.
That market exists at a certain pricing that you can extract. Beyond that, people are not going to be able to pay.
No. Fair enough.
So it's entirely up to you. So yeah, of course you can demand and say I want 100% return. All that you will find is nobody will buy it.
Yeah.
But if you allow it to be, I'll take 2% from here, so that 98% goes into a investment in healing the planet, and I'll take a fraction of the benefit from there.
Yeah.
So I hold these mineral rights. What I'll do is, if you pay me for these mineral rights, I will take your money and invest in those other things, and I'll split the performance of those things with you.
That should work.
All right. But you're saying they shouldn't do it.
No, I mean, I believe in market equalization. There is a always a point when the market clears, and there will be trial and error at that situation before we get to the point where there is enough demand and there is enough return, and people will be content and say, yeah, that's my required return for me to get involved, and if we find that level, I am involved. That will happen naturally. It will be a process, and because it's a new instrument, it will be quite erratic at times. And
yeah, but what you now have done is you've created the possibility of two different types of investors.
yeah,
You got investors who are interested in investing in the healing of the planet, or those who have avoided, who've divested, and those sort of things. You've made it possible for them to participate in a way that keeps oil, gas, and coal in the ground.
yeah, that you have managed.
Right? And then you have the other ones who are interested in cutting down the emissions.
Yeah,
Through the use of carbon credits that actually takes it from current production.
yeah.
And I think there's a third type. I'm a little lost, but I think there's kind of like a third type. And I think those third type are kind of direct investments from the bulk of people. They're like retail investors.
Saying I want to buy $10.
Yeah. And to be able to become part of that global community. That when I go and visit Jamaica, I can go and visit the people that this $10 actually end up investing in some ways.
Yeah,
That you're all part of a community in some sense. You can offer discounts to each other when you come and visit or something.
yeah,
So there's that global citizenship benefit.
yeah,
And now what happens when you have these, yeah? And you have ownership in that way, is you can now go along as owners. I have an exit, which is that I actually end up getting enough people involved, and then the businesses get involved. You can securitize the earnings more systematically and buy me out.
yeah. Package it.
No, it's not so much packaging. It's that takes you to transformational ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a third potential kind of possibility of investors is investors who buy this. Actually, this is probably the ones there to invest, to sell them on to governments. Or the countries without the mineral rights.
Yeah, which are the majority, by the way.
Yeah. So you deal with that, and you basically end up saying, actually, it gets distributed. And now each country can then decide what they do with it, with their own, as mineral rights.
Some will sell it, some will use it.
Well, some will keep it in the ground. That's the point.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, this kind of conversation goes along. Will they actually walk the walk after having talked the talk? I mean, this is just chatter, or is this genuinely real?
Yeah. It becomes tangible, and their commitments become visible for everyone to see.
And will they do that? And I don't know what the answer there is.
No, we won't know until we get to the point where that will happen, but it does require a market for this to proceed.
So for the market, you need the awareness. You need people to be able to want to do this. And what you want to be able to do is to create a launch with all these elements kind of in play. Maybe not the last one, because that might be too difficult. But you want a launch where somehow this is where there's only one, you can only make a first impression.
Yeah.
You have only one chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
So you need to line up all the civil society interest. And you actually need a whole series of pre-launches. And investors talking about it and consumers talking about it.
Yeah.
To launch a market to keep oil, gas, and coal in the ground. So come along that launch, everybody sees it as it's the thing to do. It's for you.
Yeah. That could really work.
Yeah. Well, why do you say that?
Because I think what we have felt during these 9 days now is that there is an awareness, there is a sense that current policies are failing, and we need to break out and we need to become tangible in our efforts of how we're tackling this.
You see, the thing you can do with this, right, is everyone who participates is automatically a signing up to the non-proliferation treaty.
Yeah.
You make that official. You have that certificate from them in that sense.
Yeah.
You're making that non-proliferation possible.
You get the recognition, you get the seal of approval. Yeah. That's tangible for whoever gets involved, and a benefit they can actually use commercially as well.
Well, it makes businesses easier to get involved in some
Yeah.
ways, potentially. I don't know, but it's
Well, it should.
and it's not about ESG or anything like that. It's just about company corporate investment.
Yeah.
I can go along and buy a petrol station if I so wish. If my shareholders approve it or not or whatever, and the shareholders could then be put to the vote.
Yeah. The market, then we will deal with it,
Yeah.
And there are multiple benefits coming out of it, because you will get visibility about the cost that we are imposing. So
Yeah.
you get a whole new level of transparency around the actual pricing of, for a better word, also the externalities involved when we extract oil, gas, and coal and burn it. So
we need to write that down. Basically,
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing that we need, right? Basically, we want to be able to go along and say, okay, here's the set of possibilities. This is what a market is. We need to then start thinking about, okay, who are the key people that we need? Because we need the consumer, we need the investor, we need the people who trade the credit, who trade these things.
Yeah.
In some ways, we need the cap intro people. Yeah. We need to have a whole group of people, and it needs to be in a way, and we need to work out the economics, and we need to put out a presentation that says, you get so many basis points, you get so many basis points, or so many percent, or whatever it is, under these scenarios.
Yeah. And this is the expected based on whatever probabilities you want to plug in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes a numbers thing. It's not driven by hope, wish, or kind of the world's going to be nicer or anything like that.
No, it becomes tangible and transparent.
Yeah. Do you follow?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, how do we manage to feed ourselves while we try and do this? How do you make doing this process itself a way that you can feed yourself? Where is your value proposition there for you?
Yeah. Because it's not going to happen overnight.
Exactly. So how do you add that value proposition on the journey there?
Yeah. Lots of things to ponder.
No, forget pondering. What is it? You can ponder later. There'll be time enough for pondering later. Just answer the question.
Oh, I don't know on top of my head.
Well, make something up on top of your head.
Nothing that comes to mind immediately and obviously.
Well, try harder.
Well,
You need to. You need it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how it seems, right? You can always change it along, but you need to. So what is that value proposition for whilst doing this? So what are the steps that takes on doing this? You need to talk to people from different groups.
you need to talk to lots of people.
Okay, so what are you doing when you talk to them?
You're selling them an investment.
Well, that's no good to you. If you're
No.
selling them an investment, then you only get money if the whole thing comes together.
Yeah.
And that's basically a 2 to the n problem. 1/2 to the n problem is basically exponentially small in
Yeah.
that way. So if you try to make a living by selling them an investment in that way,
It's not going
it's
to
not going
work.
to work,
No.
right? But you're going to help them to realizing that there is a choice that they want to be part of this. So what does that mean? You need to help them to develop their livelihoods into a world that doesn't need to see resources and see their livelihoods in a way that doesn't need oil, gas, and coal. Because otherwise they cannot back this.
No, that's correct.
So
Or-
you need... Carry on.
Well, they will intrinsically back it if they make more from this than the cost of doing without oil, gas, and coal.
Well, no, because, you take Nestle
Yeah.
or Danone or something. You go to them and you try and say you should spend money on this or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now, how are you going to make... And they want to go along and, if they pay you whatever it is, you take consultancies at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
They pay them because they can see how, they can make 10 times what they pay you.
Yeah.
That's why they do it, or 100 times what they pay you. That's why they pay you.
Probably more 100 times. Yeah.
And they, or alternatively, they hire you as an external person to go and sort out their technology or some transition plan or something.
Yeah.
Basically, you're basically a project manager along the way.
Yeah. Dealing with lots of logistics.
So that's how typically people going along saying you should do this gets paid.
Yeah.
Going along and saying you should do this to create a market to keep oil, gas, and coal in the ground is kind of like, you know what? If it exists, I'll be there anyway. If it doesn't, I don't need to be the one doing it.
Yeah, powerful argument to overcome.
So what do you do so that you get paid? And it's still consistent with what you're actually, with your outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise it's pointless. So
it needs to be about how you actually talk to them, and you need to engage them. You need to create events where you engage them and bring them forward. You're not going to do it on a one-on-one basis because they're not going to pay you to do that. You're going to have to invite them into some event where this can be a message that goes on through, where they have an opportunity to gain something from those events.
well, people come to events to have experiences and gain knowledge, understanding. That's what drives people into events. Getting experiences that you cannot get elsewhere and improving my understanding, knowledge, and
So how do you do it? What is that?
well, you can organize those events.
No, but what is the content? What is your value proposition here? What is the actual value that they get out of this?
It should be about making their businesses better and more resilient.
No. I don't know. But I think you've just put something that takes you down a different route, right?
Yes,
That
but it's
puts
still
you,
consistent with a world where we start shutting down oil, gas, and coal.
not really, because as soon as you go down that route, you're going to find yourself drawn more and more into the minutiae of their detail stuff. That's the natural part, right? Today I see this problem, what do I do? You come and help me, I'll pay you this. You then say, no, I'm interested in something else, and they say, I'm not interested in that. Because you have set yourself up to say, I deal with your problems. So you've got to set yourself up in a different way. And there, I think you actually end up needing to go to the words that Ku has, maybe phrase them around differently, or Cynthia and stuff. That time and space.
Yeah.
And that marketing myopia type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which can be your value add. We help you know what other people see you as. And we can therefore help you meet
Their demands and wishes and needs.
dreams.
Yeah, preferably dreams, of course.
Dreams, not demands or wishes and things. People spend money on dreams.
Yeah, they do.
So that then becomes your events, potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you need to think about what's the bait? How do you actually make that come along in the sense, what's the actual setup and organization, and how is it actually useful for them? Because at the end of the day, people see through it if it's not useful. So they need to come out of this actually thinking this was really useful.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
I learned something. And
Not I learned something. This is going to make me better.
yeah.
Lots of things I learned something, but they won't recommend it to someone else. So you need some guinea pigs to try and find out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to find the market niche. You need to find the group of people, but these needs to be the people you want, who has got the clout.
They need to
part
be
of your launch.
well. They need to be representative in that sense.
They need to be
otherwise-
your launch,
Yeah.
right? So who are they? Who are these people? Is someone like the known too big?
No, I don't think it can be too big.
Is it the CEO or is it the, cleaner?
CEOs typically have very limited time.
Doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That's not your. That's just a format how you schedule it. If it's interesting enough, they will make time.
Yeah. It has to be preferably at that level in the company for you to have the impact to drive the process forward.
I don't know. Maybe.
I think so.
So if it's that, then so you follow, right? So
Yeah.
we've got a kind of an investment proposition. We need to be able to somehow think how we're going to support ourselves while we go and chase this.
Yeah.
We've both gone through situations where we try and go and raise money. Takes
Yep.
forever.
Yeah, and it's probably not easier. So
And that's when we have a clear proposition that everybody recognizes. And they're just quizzing you as to say, why you? Here, you're trying to completely swap around how people think. You're trying to completely change between thinking about social constructs or thinking about genuine physical things. Here, you're trying to actually disrupt the governments. You're trying to disrupt funds. You're trying to disrupt the market all at the same time.
yeah, you become a very disruptive force.
So how do you maintain this? Who is really going to be the people you can rely on most to be able to constant source of income along? Maybe it's not companies. Maybe it's people. Because you need them too, remember?
Yes.
And maybe they are the people you need most. And maybe they will be, this is like Donald Trump during his election, right? In 2016, he collected mostly little bits of money from people, right?
Yes.
Versus others, which were big money, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a lot to take in for a Saturday night, but nevertheless, very interesting.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be necessary to drive it forward, and you are going to have to provide value for the people you want to come along on that process. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Well, we have actually gone over our limit tonight, albeit slightly. I feel my voice is starting to feel the strains of a long and very, very interesting discussion. We will be back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock Tokyo, 7 o'clock Karachi, and 7 o'clock London. And we have the rerun tonight, 7 o'clock Los Angeles time.
And in GMT, that's 10 to 1, 10 o'clock in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. 2 to 5 in the afternoon, and 7 to 10 in the afternoon, and 3 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the morning for those who are in GMT time zone. Then that will obviously be early. But if you're over in Hawaii or in Los Angeles, then that will be quite okay. Which one do you want to run tonight? Which session do you want to do?
I think it should be London session, but
You want to run this? Yeah?
yeah, but I'm always open-minded to other ideas.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. It'll be really interesting.
Cool.
Okay, so thank you very much to everybody for joining us on this 9th day of the 12 days of COP. It's for you, the antidote to COP28, and redirect your spending over this period to those you think are making the world better. And hopefully that will help us all into making it possible to have a market for keeping oil, gas, and coal in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
No. Okay. And